Good morning. Today is the first day of summer, and you know what that means? That means we need to get on our summer reading. So I've prepared a summer reading list for you and for myself, and then we can share books this summer, and we can begin to dig in to those fabulous novels and nonfiction. And you know, when my girls were little, really actually all the way through high school, it was always a tradition in our house that we would take a big piece of butcher paper and we would write on the butcher paper the 6 or 7 books that they were to read over the summer. Sometimes they were assigned by the teachers, and sometimes they were just things that the girls wanted to read or that we wanted to read together as a family. So they always had a list of books on their door, on their bedroom doors, that we would then check off during the summer. So I might do that this summer, put a list on my door. So let's get started. I have 2 categories of books. The first category of books is books that I have read that I recommend as summer reads. These are books that I just love, that have meant a lot to me. I have many of those, but I just picked a few. And then I have books that I plan to read this summer that I haven't read yet. So we'll start with my very favorite book. This has been my favorite book for the last decade, I think, in the series actually, and it is Diana Gabaldon's The Outlander series. There are 9 books in the series. They're always very hefty, and there's a 10th one coming, which I can't wait. It's a time travel book, and it takes you back to the Scottish clans, and the 2 main characters, Jamie and Claire. I just adore them. They're like my best friends. You're gonna love it. It's a little spicy, if you know what I mean. A little spicy, but I think you're gonna love it. So that's the Outlander series. Then a new find that my daughter recommended to me that I have now fallen in love with, which you must read, are the Louise Penny books. These are mystery books, and the characters, so rich, beautiful, lovely story, but also a fun mystery. So it's a great summer read. This is the first trio of books. If you just want to get the first book and see what it's like, it's called Still Life, the first book in this series. There's 17 in this series, and I've read the first 2, so I am just so excited that I have so many more to go because I don't want to leave these characters. The next book is one that I've read a while back, but just really stuck with me. Again, very meaty. It's called The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. He's written a lot of others. Historical fiction, in the same way that Diana Gabaldon's Outlander books are, historical fiction. Just complicated plot, but interesting, compelling, historical, yummy. And the last one is a chestnut. I've never taught it, but I read it about 2 years ago as a summer read, again, because I, of course, read it when I was in college, and I just was completely captivated by it, and that's Middlemarch by George Eliot. I loved it. I was like, you know, people thought I was crazy reading it on the barge, but anyways, loved this one. Now, the books that I haven't read that I plan to read this summer, the first is a James Patterson novel that he has co-written with Bill Clinton. Now, the thing I didn't tell you about the Louise Penny books is that Louise Penny is a great favorite of Hillary Clinton, who, of course, I adore. And Hillary Clinton told Louise Penny that her books, Louise Penny's books, got her through the year after the election, the year after she lost to Donald Trump. And they developed a relationship and are now co-writing a book together. And so I thought, oh gosh, that's so interesting, and it's so unique that should happen. But then today, as I'm looking through books, I see that Bill Clinton has co-written a book with James Patterson, I think it's called The President's Daughter. So actually, they both did the same thing. They're both writing kind of mystery novels with famous mystery writers or suspense writers. So that's funny, but interesting, and I want to read Bill Clinton's book. The next book is also a fiction book, but by Stacey Abrams, who, again, I adore, and I attribute much of our success in the last election to her. And it's called While Justice Sleeps. I think it should be a fascinating read. And the last one is a book called Caste. It's a nonfiction book by Isabel Wilkerson. And it is about racism, institutional inequality, about the oppression that exists here in the United States, but looks at it through this lens of a caste system. And how that has impacted us over the years as a nation. I think it should be a really interesting and insightful read. So I'm going to look into that as well. And now we have a special guest. Let's see if he's ready. Who's going to share with you his summer reads or some of his favorite reads that you might want to check out this summer. Robert and I have different taste in reading. I like a lot of fiction and historical fiction, and I like romance. But he likes science books, mostly, I would say, and nonfiction. So, Mr. Hubble, tell us what you're thinking about summer reading.
Hi, everyone. Well, I was coerced into doing a guest spot here, so this is against my better judgment.
Oh, no!
But I'm happy to support Jill in all things. So I do have different reading tastes, and I also want to say that I have different reading modes. So I run in the morning, and I like to listen to audiobooks when I run. And a recent audiobook that was fun, and it would be good as an audiobook or as a read, is the latest book by Andy Weir. You might recognize his name. He's the author of The Martian, which was ultimately made into a movie starring Matt Damon. And Weir has a particular writing style where he takes actual science and turns it into sort of science thrillers. The Martian was a great hit. His second, which was called Artemis, not so much. And his third is called Project Hail Mary. It's really quite thought-provoking, and it has a major twist that I won't give away.
But it's super scary. I had to stop listening to it. It's too scary.
It does have a little bit of tension in it. He always puts his characters in threatening situations that they have to reason their way out of. But actually, at the end, it turns out to be a very sweet book. I won't give away the major plot twist because it would ruin it for you. But I do recommend it. I think it's a very good follow-up to The Martian, for those of you who like The Martian. The second book that I want to recommend, I think, is a really important book, and I would urge everyone to read it. It's called The Code Breakers, and it is about the discovery and ultimately the awarding of the Nobel Prize for the discovery of something called CRISPR-Cas9, which is a gene editing tool. It's by Walter Isaacson, and you've probably read a biography or a history by Isaacson. He did best-selling biographies on Benjamin Franklin, Albert Einstein, Steve Jobs, Leonardo da Vinci, to mention a few. CRISPR-Cas9, first of all, like all of Isaacson's books, he takes very complicated subjects and makes them not only comprehensible, but quite entertaining and, with some tension to keep the story going. And he didn't need to invent any tension in this discovery. There were two female scientists, Jennifer Doudna at Berkeley and a French scientist, Emmanuelle Charpentier, who really isn't associated with any particular academic institution because she's such a rebel in the scientific world. And those two women, more than anyone else, were responsible for the amazing discovery of CRISPR-Cas9. So there's an entire story in the book about how the scientific establishment effectively attempted just 2 years ago to write them out of the story of the discovery of CRISPR-Cas9. Fortunately, the Nobel Prize Committee didn't accept the effort to try to write them out of the story, which was led, sadly, by some preeminent scientists at a Harvard Associated Institute, the Broad Institute.
He told you all about the book, so now you don't have to read it.
Not at all, because that's only part of the story, and of course you know that they won the Nobel Prize. The other part is that CRISPR-Cas9 is truly revolutionary. It is the most important scientific discovery of our lifetimes. It will change human evolution more than you can imagine. And here's the scary part, that if you have a credit card with about $250 credit limit on it, you can purchase everything you need to engage in human germline gene editing in your garage. Now, that's illegal. You're not supposed to do that, but scientists around the world have already broken the scientific consensus about editing germline. So it's a very important book. So let me move on. Jill is giving me the universal symbol for the fact that I'm talking too much, at least in our relationship, where she goes like this. I've been thinking, this is a book I've read several times. It's called Reality is Not What It Seems. It is by Carlo Rovelli, who's an Italian physicist. He's one of the founders of something called loop quantum gravity. It's an effort to discover a unified theory of quantum mechanics and gravity. It's a beautiful book because Rovelli is a poetic writer. He tells the story of loop quantum gravity starting in 450 BC, a little Greek town called Miletus, where Anaximander and Democritus, and then their successors, Epicurus and Lucretius and others, all the way through Richard Feynman, Einstein, and others, developed and wrestled with the concept of gravity. This book is completely comprehensible, and when you are done with it, you will not only think that you understand the theory of loop quantum gravity, but you will be amazed at for how thousands of years scientists have been struggling with exactly the same questions. Democritus, who lived hundreds of years BC, wrote a description of something called Brownian motion. And for any of you who have some scientific knowledge, you'll know that Brownian motion is when little particles seem to be buffeted by nothing. Albert Einstein won the Nobel Prize in 1905 for in part explaining the concept of Brownian motion. But Democritus wrote a beautiful essay hundreds of years before BC explaining Brownian motion and positing that it was caused by exactly the same mechanism that Einstein later proved and for which he was awarded the Nobel Prize. After you read Carlo Rovelli's book on this, you will run out and purchase his other books and read them. They're filled with allusions and references to Dante's Inferno, other poetry, other great works of art. So it's a beautiful read, and I highly encourage it if you have any interest in current efforts to unify quantum mechanics and relativity. The last book I'm going to read is really recommend is really an off the out of the box suggestion. It's called What is Life by Erwin Schrödinger, and I bought an early edition as a treat to myself. Erwin Schrödinger, all of you know, even though you don't know him, because he came up with the famous thought experiment of Schrödinger's cat, the cat in the box, and there's the quantum event, and the question is, if the cat's life is dependent on the quantum event happening, is the cat alive or is the cat dead? And the answer in quantum mechanics is yes. It's in a state of superposition, and it's both alive and dead at the same time until the observer looks at it. And everyone thinks, isn't that weird? And Schrödinger's point was not that could actually be true, but look how absurd these simple explanations of quantum mechanics are. And just like a great scientist, he came up with a very simple thought experiment to communicate a very profound truth. So, like all great scientists, one of the things he did is he took a sabbatical, and he was at Trinity College in Dublin, and he decided to study biology, of all things. And while he was there, he delivered a series of lectures, and those became the series of lectures on biology, and he collected those lectures in a collection called What is Life? And those lectures, which took place, I think, in the 40s, before the discovery of DNA, were truly visionary in his formulation of what life is. And this book became the impetus for Watson and Crick, for example, in their efforts to discover the structure of the DNA molecule. It was important to Jennifer Doudna, who later went on to win the Nobel Prize for the discovery of CRISPR-Cas9. And let me just, it's a very thin volume, it's very accessible, but it's also very thought-provoking. And let me give you an example. So like all good physicists, Schrödinger starts his essays on what is life by thinking about scale. And what he did is he sat down and said, well, life is big. I mean, humans are big and atoms are tiny. And what consequences flow from that basic difference in scale? And those are the kinds of things that Schrödinger does in his What is Life series. So I recommend those, and I hope that I haven't talked too much here and gone on, but as you can tell, I'm enthusiastic about this, and I do really think that these 4 books are quite accessible and would be enjoyable over the summer.
There we go. Well, thank you, Robert. That was lovely. It makes me feel like I didn't do a very good job of explaining my books, but he did an excellent job, so yay. There was one last book that Robert and I listened to together while we went to the mountains this past weekend, and that is something that's on the New York Times bestseller list, and it's called The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. And it was a fun read, and it was very compelling about what happens to a family when tragedy strikes. I'll just make it very vague. But yeah, we listened to that and we had fun with that. So lots of things to think about for this summer. Share your summer reading with me, and I'll expand my list and put it on the door.